We grow up with the expectation that we must be liked, must fit in, must be pleasant in order to survive. And so we learn to smile even when we're unhappy, to agree even when we don't believe, to sacrifice even when it goes unrecognized. We believe the more we blend in, the more we'll be loved. But in truth, the more we seek validation, the more we lose our identity. We're no longer living, we're merely reacting to others' gazes, words, and expectations. Transformation doesn't come from dramatic actions, but from a subtle shift in mindset, from I need to be accepted to I know who I am, from shrinking ourselves to fit the mold to standing tall and letting the world adjust. It's not loud and it needs no explanation, yet it is the strongest declaration of all. You no longer need permission to be yourself. You walk into a room without trying to impress, without forcing yourself to stand out, and yet you still draw attention simply by the calm energy you carry. Not because you speak loudly, but because you no longer need to. You don't have to prove anything because your presence already answers the question. What earns true respect is not appearance, reputation, or achievements, but clarity within your personal standard that you quietly uphold without compromise. Those who are truly magnetic don't rush to prove themselves, don't fear being misunderstood, and don't need to be liked by everyone. They are quiet but not invisible, steadfast but not rigid. They withdraw from one-sided relationships, decline empty conversations, reject hollow noise, not out of arrogance, but because they've understood peace is a choice, not a reward. The greatest power doesn't lie in controlling others, but in the ability to remain unshaken amidst chaos. When you no longer tremble at rejection, no longer spiral from judgment, you begin to stand firm. Not because the world has become stable, but because you no longer waver inside. When you truly know who you are, you're no longer swayed by praise or criticism, no longer let others define your worth. You no longer live to be chosen, you live because you've already chosen yourself. And that is the beginning of all change. No dramatic push needed, no one's permission required, only one thing matters: remembering who you are. When you live with that clarity, the world no longer dares to overlook you, not because you demand it, but because you no longer settle. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay. Not everyone who needs you is worthy of you. And the hardest truth to accept is this: the more accessible you are, the more easily your value is taken for granted. People tend not to cherish what they didn't have to work for. The more available you are, the less they see you as something precious. Not because they're bad people, but because it's human nature. What's always within reach is rarely seen in its true worth. We're often misled by the idea that love, care, or kindness only have meaning when given unconditionally. But when kindness is poured into spaces where there's no reciprocity, it ceases to be noble, it becomes self-abandonment. Always picking up the phone, always showing up, always helping, even when the other person doesn't truly deserve it, won't make you more respected. It only makes you seem obvious. And from there, people begin to disregard your words, your feelings, even your boundaries. Every connection should be built on mutual effort. When you're the only one investing, the only one texting first, the only one maintaining the bond, the only one apologizing, even when you're not at fault, you're creating a distorted sense of your own worth. You're teaching others that your presence is cheap, that they don't have to try to keep you, that they can forget you, neglect you, and come back whenever they please without consequence. And the worst part is, you start believing it too. The truth is, no one can take your value away unless you let them. And the first step to protecting yourself isn't changing others, but revoking access. No drama, no resentment, no announcements. Just quietly stop replying to late night messages. Stop saying yes when your heart says no. Stop playing the rescuer in a relationship where you're the one always left behind. Your silence, your absence will say it all. When you disappear from places where you were once taken for granted, people are forced to realize what they've lost. You don't need to fight to be respected. You just need to stop showing up in places that make you feel small. Because your presence is a gift and not everyone deserves to receive it. When you begin setting boundaries, when you start prioritizing relationships that nourish you rather than drain you, the world around you will realign. Those who once overlooked you will retreat. Those who are worthy will step closer. And you'll realize you didn't lose anyone. You only removed those who were never truly present for you. Revoking access isn't coldness, it's the act of someone who understands the value of peace. When you're no longer pulled into calls just to hear complaints, when you're no longer a stopover for souls who only visit when they're tired and vanish once they've lightened their load, when you no longer strain to hold a place in someone's life, you're not getting weaker, you're getting stronger. And at that moment, you send a clear message: I'm no longer easy to have. If you want me to stay, you have to be worthy. Don't be afraid of being called cold. Don't fear being told you've changed. Because if they truly valued you, they'd be grateful you're still there, not just come running when you pull away. Let your absence be a mirror reflecting distorted relationships. Let the space you leave behind force them to face themselves. Because those who truly care about you will never let you question whether you matter. When you choose yourself, when you stop giving unconditionally, when you dare to reclaim what you once handed out so freely, you're not hurting anyone. You're healing yourself. And that's not selfish. That's the beginning of freedom. Not every place is worth your presence. Not every call deserves your answer. Not every relationship is worth holding on to. There are spaces you once belonged to that no longer fit who you are. There are people who once made you feel whole, but over time only leave you feeling empty. And what wears you down isn't that they've changed, it's that you've grown, yet still cling to old attachments. It's time you learn to disappear from the places that make you forget your own worth. Chaos always finds a place in life. In dramatic conversations, in half-hearted relationships, in calculated silence, in repeated apologies without change. You used to believe patience was kindness. You used to think forgiveness was a sign of compassion. But then came the moment you realized forgiveness doesn't mean continued endurance. Compassion doesn't mean warping your own boundaries to maintain a connection that has long since rotted. Your presence is a form of emotional currency. It's not just about physically being somewhere, it's about bringing peace, trust, and sincerity. But when you keep showing up in places that only drain your energy, you're unconsciously hollowing yourself out to feed things that have no intention of growing. You can't heal someone by standing in the eye of their storm. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk away so they can face themselves and you can return to yourself. Becoming invisible is not running away. It's the conscious action of someone who understands what deserves their presence. You don't need to make an announcement. You don't need to make a scene. You simply stop showing up. Don't answer the calls that only come when they need a place to unload. Don't join conversations that leave you feeling smaller every time. Don't keep showing up in places that require you to shrink in order to stay. When you stop being present in spaces that no longer serve you, you're not losing anyone, you're reclaiming yourself. When you choose not to react, choose silence, choose to withdraw, others may mistake you for being cold, but that doesn't matter because peace was never about pleasing everyone. Peace is knowing your limits, knowing what soothes your mind, and no longer letting others drag you into storms they've created. It's not that you're unkind, it's that you've learned too well the cost of being constantly present in the wrong places. Exhaustion, bitterness, and feeling alone in relationships you once held dear. Choosing where to be is a refined skill of maturity. It requires the courage to not show up in places that once meant everything. It demands the clarity to realize you haven't changed for the worse, you're simply moving closer to your true self. And to stay true to that, you must be willing to let go of what once felt essential. Invisibility may feel like loneliness at first, but it's intentional solitude, not passive isolation. It's the quiet needed to recenter yourself, to recharge, to clarify your values and your mission. And then you'll realize your timely absence makes a louder statement than any forced presence ever could. Let yourself appear only where you don't have to perform. Let your energy be a gift, not a random giveaway. When you have the courage to disappear from chaos, you make space for peace to arrive. And once you begin living in that deliberate stillness, every relationship, opportunity, and space that remains will become clear. They either nourish you or they're no longer worthy of you. Silence is not weakness. It is a deliberate choice made by someone who understands that not everything deserves a response, not every conversation needs their presence, and not everyone is worthy of knowing what they're thinking. In a world where noise is seen as power, those who know how to stay silent become a quiet yet intense force, not because they're afraid to speak, but because they don't need to say much to be heard. People often believe that to be respected, you must assert yourself. But the more you grow, the more you realize what makes you formidable is not your ability to argue, but your ability to observe. There's no need to push your way in to be acknowledged, no need to shout to be heard. The one who remains silent sees what others overlook, reads what others try to hide, and understands what words can't describe: energy, behavioral misalignments, the dishonesty behind a polite smile. Observation is a quiet kind of intelligence. When you stop reacting, you start registering. You'll see who keeps their word and who's only good at promises, who remembers small details and who only shows up when there's something to gain, who's truly there for you and who's only present when they need you. Awakening doesn't come from loud experiences, but from the ability to look deeply into what's happening when everyone else is busy talking and you are simply watching. Silence gives you time to feel a person's true energy, not in what they say, but in how they make you feel when they enter or leave a room. A truly peaceful person doesn't try to impress you. They're not in a rush. They don't need to prove anything. And they certainly don't seek the spotlight. They walk in with steadiness, a steadiness that only exists when there's no longer chaos inside. Those who talk too much often reveal their fears. Those who over-explain are usually hiding something. Those who always need to be heard often lack inner calm. But those who choose silence, they're stepping back, not to retreat, but to understand clearly. They observe, not out of suspicion, but because they want to see the full picture before deciding. They don't need words to establish boundaries. Their energy already does. When you've developed the ability to observe, you're not easily fooled by surface appearances. You don't trust too quickly, but you're not cynical. You're not easily hurt by irresponsible behavior because you already saw it coming in the inconsistency of tone, the insincere eyes, the empty compliments. Observation helps you know who to invest in, who to keep at a distance, and when to walk away. The truth is, observers often carry fewer wounds, not because they haven't lived through pain, but because they know how to avoid it early. They see the signs, they read the signals, they understand the outcome and choose to leave the game before it pulls them under, not because they're cowards, but because they're wise enough not to waste energy on things without lasting value. The world will try to provoke a reaction from you. Agitation, provocation, distortion, these are all tools to throw you off balance. But when you choose not to react, you maintain control. When you choose silence, others reveal themselves. When you choose to observe, you see the truth without confrontation, without strong words, just a long enough gaze, a deep enough stillness. Silence doesn't make you weak. It makes you unpredictable. It helps you reclaim your rhythm while the world rushes on. It gives you the power to choose not reacting as a response, not speaking as an answer. Not participating is a form of strength. And observation is not passivity, it is the highest form of agency. Because the one who observes is the one who survives, avoids traps, and travels far. You don't need to have a voice in every conversation. Sometimes true strength lies in the fact that you can remain silent and still make others reflect. When you learn to look deeply at what others ignore, you not only avoid mistakes, you become someone no one can easily manipulate. In a world of overexposure, the one who knows how to stay silent becomes rare. And rare always means valuable. True value is not measured by stage lights, rounds of applause, or public recognition. It is measured by how you treat yourself when no one is watching. The moments you rise early in silence to do the right thing, with no praise waiting. The times you fall, with no one by your side, yet still lift yourself up without needing an audience. That is strength. That is self-respect. And that is the only solid foundation for a life of real worth. We are taught how to be loved from the outside, but few are taught how to love themselves from within. You will never truly feel respected by the world if you secretly diminish yourself behind closed doors. No one hears how you speak to yourself after failure, but those very words shape the energy you carry out into the world. You cannot demand respect from others if you are the first to quietly deny your own worth. Self-respect doesn't lie in performance, it lies in your actions when no one is watching. It's in the choices between discipline and delay, between action and excuses, between sticking to your goals or letting them go just because no one is paying attention. It's how you speak to yourself after every stumble. Do you scold yourself, or do you choose to forgive, learn, and keep going? Your answer defines the internal value you carry every day. The truth is, you are always broadcasting your self-worth, even without speaking. Others can feel whether you're living from confidence or from lack. They may not hear the voice in your head, but they'll sense it through your standards, the way you walk, your eyes, your choices, and who you allow near your heart. You can work hard, dress well, and speak intelligently, but if deep down you still doubt yourself, the world will sense that and treat you as if you're never enough. What's truly frightening isn't others underestimating you, it's when you start believing they're right. Honoring yourself in the dark is about upholding your standards, even when no one is forcing you to. It's eating clean, exercising, learning not to show off, but because you believe you deserve a better version of yourself. It's turning down an offer, not because someone told you to, but because you know it no longer aligns with your direction. It's walking away from draining relationships, not for revenge, not for attention, but simply because you want peace. Self-respect is not arrogance, it is clarity. It's the ability to say no to what pulls you away from your core values. It is the strength of someone who doesn't need validation to know they're on the right path. And the best part is, when you start living as though you are already enough, you begin to attract people, opportunities, and environments that reflect that exact value. The world out there may deny you, ignore you, even misjudge you. But what it cannot do is touch the respect you hold for yourself if you've built it deep and strong enough in those unseen moments. Every morning you choose to rise despite exhaustion. Every time you speak the truth, even when you fear being misunderstood. Every act of integrity done without applause. That is how you lay the foundation for self-respect. Quietly, humbly, yet firmly, so firmly that no one can take it away. And one day, someone will ask, how are you so strong? But they won't understand that your strength didn't come from outside cheer. It came from the moments you chose not to abandon yourself when no one was watching, because true self-respect doesn't need an audience. It only needs you clear enough not to compromise and steady enough to live right, even in the dark. Every person lives by an invisible standard, a baseline for how they allow others to treat them, a ceiling for what they're willing to endure, and a quiet boundary that defines the value of every relationship. Whether you realize it or not, the world reflects the standard you set for yourself. However far you allow others to go, they will go. However much you accept, that's where they'll stop. And if you let things unfold beneath what you deserve, your life will gradually shrink, not because you lack value, but because you've silently agreed that this is enough. People often hesitate to set high standards out of fear of being alone, fear of being judged as difficult, demanding, or too much. But you weren't born to be convenient for others. You don't need to lower your dreams, your values, or your kindness just to make someone else comfortable. Every time you compromise on what you know is wrong, you're teaching others I can be negotiated with. And once you allow that negotiation, it never stops. Standards are not arrogance. They are a form of self-respect with boundaries. They are a quiet declaration. I know who I am, and I will not accept anything that makes me lose that. When you live with clear standards, you don't need to explain much. The way you act, what you decline, what you don't tolerate, those are your messages. And the beauty of it is, your standards don't just repel what's unaligned, they also attract the people and opportunities that are. Those who truly respect you won't feel threatened by your standards. They'll be inspired by them. They won't flee when you set boundaries. They'll understand those boundaries are what make you trustworthy. But not everyone will respond that way. Some will pull away, say you've changed, call you cold, say you've become distant. Don't let that make you doubt yourself. Those who once benefited from your lack of limits will always be uncomfortable when you start to build them. And then there comes a moment, maybe after betrayal, after a conversation that made you feel invisible, or just a quiet realization, I don't want to live like this anymore. That's when you start raising your standards, not to prove anything, but because you're tired of things that only fill time while draining your soul. You don't need more people. You need the right people. You don't need more promises. You need consistency. You don't need temporary. You need something that lets you stay yourself while you're in it. From that moment, everything begins to shift. You become selective not because you think you're better than others, but because you've paid the price for accepting less than you deserve. You say no more clearly. You walk away faster when someone shows up only to take, never to give. You stop trying to fix broken relationships by blaming yourself. And most importantly, you no longer fear being alone because you understand that your presence holds value. Not everyone will understand that, and they don't have to, because you're not living to convince, you're living to remain whole. And every time you uphold your standards, you're building a wall not to shut people out, but to protect what's sacred inside: your peace, your worth, the clarity it took you years to build. It's not easy to hold your standards when you're tired, when you're lonely, when results haven't shown up yet. But remember, every time you compromise on what you know is wrong, you slow down your journey toward becoming the best version of yourself. And every time you stand firm, even when no one is watching, you prove to yourself that you're strong enough not to trade your dignity just to keep someone around. Your standards are your compass. They keep you from being swept away by life's randomness. They help you see what's worth keeping and what needs to go. And when you live by those standards, no lowering, no bargaining, no compromising, the world can no longer treat you the same, because you're no longer that version of yourself that was easy to reach. You're someone who knows what you deserve and will never settle for less. Not everything you love is meant to be held onto. Some relationships were once light, but gradually became shadows that dimmed your own. Some places once felt like home, but suddenly turned cramped, cold, unfamiliar. But the hardest part isn't recognizing that shift. It's having the courage to walk away without applause, without validation, without needing anyone to understand. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is leave in silence. We're often taught that endings require explanations, that you must speak your truth, lay out the reasons, justify your feelings, convince others you're right. But the truth is, some departures don't need to be explained. What you endured, what you silently carried, what you repeatedly tolerated, those are reasons enough, even if no one sees them. Not everyone deserves to know why you're walking away, especially when they were never truly present when you needed them. You don't need to slam the table, don't need to cry, don't need to argue to prove you were hurt. You only need a quiet finality strong enough to make others feel the absence you leave behind. Because those who once took your presence for granted will feel it most when you're no longer there, when you stop replying to their late messages, when you stop saying yes every time they need rescuing, when you stop showing up to mend a connection only you were holding together. That's not escape, that's self-respect. Leaving in silence is an unspoken declaration that you've grown enough not to prove anything anymore, that you've learned to choose yourself instead of waiting for someone else to change, that you no longer have the strength or the will to fix something that has already rotted from the inside. You're not angry. You're not blaming. You're simply done hoping for something that's let you down too many times. People may call you cold, distant, heartless, but only you know you didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because you could no longer keep sacrificing yourself in a place that no longer deserved you. You once stayed when you should have left, tried when you should have let go, softened your voice, made peace, waited, compromised just to hold on to something that had already slipped away. And those moments wore down your heart, enough for you to understand. Love doesn't always mean staying. Caring doesn't mean enduring forever. Maturity is knowing what to continue and what to finally end. Leaving quietly can confuse others. They won't understand why you're silent, why you don't speak a word more, why you don't resolve things. But you owe no one an explanation for protecting yourself. Because if they truly cared, they would have noticed earlier the light fading from your eyes, the softening of your voice, the growing space between two people that neither dared to acknowledge. If they really paid attention, they would have changed long before your silence became your exit. Leaving in silence isn't about hurting anyone, it's about healing yourself. It's about ending the conversation that too often left you unheard, about stepping off the path where you were the only one still walking, about creating space for something more worthy to arrive. And most of all, it's about being remembered not for your exhausted presence, but for the value of your absence. The silence in your departure is not weakness. It is the peak of self-mastery. It's the decision of someone who loves themselves enough not to wait for permission to walk away from what's slowly making them disappear. And when you leave without making noise, others are forced to face what they've lost. No words to argue with, no image to cling to, no excuse to hide behind. just space wide enough for them to finally listen to themselves and deep enough for you to keep walking without looking back. Because sometimes the way you leave is the clearest message of how forgotten you felt while staying. And when your heart is big enough to let go without bitterness, you don't just free yourself, you open the door to a version of you that is stronger, more peaceful, and far less fragile than before. Life has a subtle way of making you forget yourself. Not all at once, but through small moments. A silence when you should have spoken up, a forgiveness that your heart wasn't ready for, an attempt to please others while you were quietly falling apart. Little by little, you begin to shrink, to adjust, to dim. You tell yourself it's okay while everything inside is crying out, and just like that, you forget who you are. You once had principles, dreams, a clear sense of self-respect, but then you compromised for love, for expectations, for fear of losing someone. You started calling endurance, sacrifice, silence, maturity, and being taken for granted the price of love. But deep down, you knew that wasn't you. You were simply drifting away from your truest self, trying to stay in something that no longer fit who you've become. And then there comes a moment, perhaps quiet and unnoticed, when you can no longer bear your own pretending. A moment when you can't keep acting like you're okay, like you don't see it, like you're not hurting. That's when awakening begins. It doesn't require a dramatic event or a loud declaration. It's simply the feeling it's time to return, time to stop living like a faded version of someone else, time to remember who you are. And when you remember, everything changes. Not because the world becomes easier, not because others suddenly start respecting you, but because you're no longer willing to accept anything that dims your inner light. You start saying no without guilt. You choose solitude over places that demand you to fake it. You turn away from one-sided relationships, empty promises, and kind gestures lacking sincerity. You no longer need to try so hard to be seen. Your presence becomes clear without performance. You stop trying to control how others perceive you. Because, truth doesn't need to be constantly proven. It only needs to be consistently lived. And from that point forward, you no longer live to be loved. You live to remain whole. You will lose some people. You will walk away from certain relationships. You will miss out on a few opportunities, but you will reclaim the most precious thing of all, yourself. You'll find strength in silence, freedom in boundaries, and peace in no longer needing to prove anything. You stop apologizing for changing, for raising your standards, for being more selective. Because, it's not about changing, it's about coming home. Coming back to that strong, clear, dignified version of you that existed before life taught you to settle. And the miracle is, once you remember who you are, you no longer need to force anyone to understand you. You no longer beg to be loved, no longer chase for attention, because now you know those who recognize your value will stay without needing you to fight to keep them. Those who don't will naturally drift away, but you will no longer be lost. That clarity rearranges everything around you. What no longer fits will fall away. What belongs will arrive in the right way at the right time. You no longer have to fight for space in someone else's life because you've chosen to stand in your rightful place in your own. And from the moment you remember who you are, you walk forward with your head held high, no longer seeking validation, no longer afraid of being misunderstood. Because real light needs no explanation. It only needs to be lit at the right time. And you are that light once forgotten, but never extinguished. Now, all you need to do is live as if you never forgot. And everything will change from within and forever.